Why? The link.
You're live.
My computer's loading. Perfect. Hi, everyone. If you can. Can you hear me? You can. Okay, awesome. Oh, thank you. I'm appreciative that someone is alerting me to that. So on our end, just to kind of give this like tech kind of glitchy thing that happens, it's a little bit of a delay from the way I'm speaking into YouTube. And so I'm going to turn my volume down so it doesn't like throw me off. And I'm trying really hard not to look at the video stream because it's very confusing to kind of look at that. Oh, and thank you again, my friend Monica, alerting us that she can hear us. So I'm Jessica Patty, and I'm here tonight as the district Melrose Public Schools instructional specialist for social emotional learning. And I'm here just kind of going in order of who you see on the left with Kate Mahoney, who is the Lincoln School social emotional learning teacher. And then Margaret, do you want to introduce yourself and say hi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Adams. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and I'm super grateful to Jess and Kate for sharing and being with us here tonight to share a little bit about how we can support our children at home as they're learning at home. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you. All right. So again, I am like far from the tech specialists that you've seen in the past 2 weeks. And so if I have a tech moment, just bear with me and just have, show me some grace tonight that this is all new. And so I'm appreciative to have you here. As I said, SEL specialist for the district. And tonight we are having kind of like a general overview of how to support your child at home. And so some of the things just to remind, if you haven't read what's on the screen now, is just knowing that the session is going to be recorded. So if you need to step away because life happens, the session will be recorded and you can watch it later. The slides that I'm going through will also be shared. I will do the best I can to share things as we go, but just time permitting, I might not be able to. So it might just be me pointing out that something is a shared item for you. And then just letting you know that we can't see you. So if you're trying to alert us with your hands or a gesture, we can't see you. And so just knowing that the chat is the best way to communicate. Margaret and Kate are going to be monitoring the chat throughout our session. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have wonderings, just feel free to use the chat. So tonight, we are going to start with what we call is as a weather report. And so in school right now, pre-K through 12, we are advising teachers to start their classes, whether it's a full day at the elementary level or just a class at the secondary level, or a specialist, just a class, to start with an emotional check-in. And so what we're doing is asking teachers to kind of have a temperature gauge of where their students are at so that they can plan accordingly. And so in this moment, we are hoping, oh, good question. We are hoping for you to think about where you're at. So just take a moment and look at the options on the screen and just think about what your weather report is right now. And you're welcome to either communicate your weather report to someone that's sitting next to you. And if it's your child, feel free to engage them in that. If it's your partner, feel free to engage them, or to share it in the chat, either using words or emojis. Emojis are also welcome. And so I'll give everyone a minute just to communicate their weather report. I see we have a tornado and a rainbow. Awesome. And so just like the teacher would in the classroom, I'm going to openly kind of share my weather report for the moment. I would say that I am probably windy in the moment. It's been a big kind of anticipatory moment or day just thinking of this coming. I'm really excited to be here and to be having this moment with everybody, but it is very nerve-wracking. We had over 300 people register, and I don't know if everyone will come, but it feels pretty amazing that so many parents are, so many grown-ups, home grown-ups wanted to be here tonight. So thank you. So tonight, just wait for it to switch. Delay. Oh, there we go. So tonight, our agenda, we did introductions. This is our brief overview. We are going to talk about creating a space for learning in your home. We are going to talk about thinking proactively about challenges surrounding learning. We are going to talk about setting and reflecting on goals with your child. So those are, when I looked at the feedback that those over 300 people shared in the original invite, this is where everything kind of sorted into. And so this is our topic for tonight, or our overview for tonight. And as we move through the night, if you feel like I say something and you're like, oh, I just wish she would go deeper into that, we're going to ask for feedback at the end. So just take note of that. So if we get to thinking proactively about challenges and you say, I just really wish you would spend more time on that, that's really good feedback again at the end for you to say to us, please do a whole session just on this. And that's something that we can continue to talk about. And so one of the other things that we will talk about tonight, oh, wait a second. There we go. One of the other things that we are talking about tonight, or that I like to start with, is norms. We use meeting norms in all professional meetings in Melrose. I do a lot of professional development in Melrose, and this is something that I take very seriously. And so the norms that I want you to really think about as we kind of enter this session together is, number one for me is always take care of you. If you need to step away, it's not a problem. Step away. Again, the recording will be sent out to all families in the district. I want you to acknowledge that growth takes time, and change can take time. So if you are thinking, this is really hard for me, it's okay. Just acknowledge that it takes time. We want to show grace and empathy for everyone. I had asked for that in the beginning for the technology. Again, there's like this 10-second delay that just is really weird. And then I want you to accept in this moment, or try to accept, that questions will likely go unanswered. We are going to do the best we can to address all of the, we'll say, social emotionally based questions that were shared. However, I will say that likely your technology questions will go unanswered tonight. However, they won't go unseen. You had several other things around logistics of like homework and things like that, schedules. Again, they may go unheard or unlooked at tonight, but they did not go unseen. We are very much looking at them at a district level. And I want you to try to be open to new ideas. And so the next part of the presentation, or the next step of this, is for me to show you my two children, AKA my coworkers. I like to refer to them as that because I am professionally, like, I am a teacher, and personally, I am a mom to McKenna, who is 6, and Jackson, who is 3, almost 4 in December. And they have thrown me for a loop all summer. I have worked pretty much full-time all summer as the SEL specialist in Melrose in social emotional learning, for anyone that might just be joining us. And they have given me really awesome days and very cooperative days, and they have given me some really challenging days. My daughter is an absolute saint. She is this like mini, just like angel in the making. She is always there to help me and to help calm me down when I'm having a challenging moment. It makes me feel like I've done something right as a parent. And then there's my son, who is a tornado all the time. He is so loving and so passionate, but he's also so fiery with his emotions. And it's really challenging sometimes. And so you'll hear me reference him a lot throughout, and you'll hear me tell a lot of stories throughout our time together today. So that's McKenna and Jackson. One of the things that or two of the words you might hear me say tonight quite frequently are synchronous and asynchronous. And so I want you to think of synchronous as being with the teacher. So this is a really simple way of kind of thinking about it. Synchronous is with the teacher, whether virtually or in person. And it is completing work with the teacher present. And if I say asynchronous, I want you to think of not with the teacher, working through work or looking at instructional kind of videos at your own pace or at a student pace. So I just want to go over those words to make sure that we understand them before we really kind of get into the night. So the first thing that we want to think about is learning spaces. And so creating a space for learning. And I want to think about, why do we create a space for learning? This is a space in my home, with the exception of, I think, 3 pictures tonight. They are all pictures either of spaces in my home or spaces in friends' home or families' homes. I tried to really keep it to pictures or real situations that I could talk to you about, so I could give you as much background as possible in case you ask questions. And so when we think about creating spaces for learning for our children, we do this because we want to be predictable, and we want our students and us to feel prepared, right? And so when we take that time to create their learning space for them and with them, we're giving them this opportunity to know what to expect. Right? And when we involve them and when we take the time to develop a learning space, we are also motivating them to learn, right? Instead of just saying, I want you to sit in this space. Well, why are we sitting in this space? And what do you need to make this space ready for learning? And so with that, we can help them be ready for more challenging tasks as the year goes on. And so another thing we want to think about is what a space for learning looks like. So a space for learning, we want to do the best we can to create a space that has their learning materials in it. Now, being realistic, I live in a 1,100 square foot home. It is not that big. It is small in comparison to other homes in the town that I live in, and we make it work. I don't have a designated office space. My child and I, when she's home for asynchronous learning, we are sharing spaces together a lot of the time. And so one of the things that we try to think of for both myself and for her is we want to have a well-lit area. So just a situation where she's not squinting at the screen, or myself. I feel like I'm constantly going in her room and saying, like, open the shades, like, you need to keep these open. I want you to have real light in the room. And we want to consider distractions. So I am one of those people, and my daughter is the same, that like if the TV is on or if something else is on in the room, she just will not focus. So I direct her kind of to a place, if my son's watching TV, which keeps him kind of in a place that he's not in our hair, but I make sure that she's not facing it or that she's away from it. We want to have visual supports if possible. And your teachers, I have to say, would be incredibly open to helping with this if you're unsure of what visual supports for your child's age level should look like. But that, like, when I say visual supports, I mean a schedule, graphic organizers that are appropriate for that age level, maybe numbers charts, things like that. And then you want to make sure that their tools are accessible. So one of the things that we've been sharing with teachers is it's really helpful to let students and grown-ups know maybe ahead of time what materials are needed, whether it's the day before, the morning of, or just at the start of a lesson, but giving that opportunity to maybe get and retrieve the materials. And so just making sure that they're accessible is really helpful to the teacher and to your student. Another thing to think about when we're thinking of what a space for learning looks like is thinking about how to personalize the space for our child so that they feel connected to it. And so this is one of the few pictures I've found, just like if you search for learning spaces at home, that is not a child I know. But I love this one because it's personalized with the child's name. There is an affirming statement at the top, just kind of there as a motivator. And I would likely think that these might be the child's favorite colors, or they could be the child's favorite colors. So just thinking about how to personalize it so that your child feels like they want to be in that space. One of the things I love about these privacy boards that a lot of teachers and a lot of families are starting to use and recommend is that it really creates a visual kind of space that they're not distracted by things around them. And we'll talk about that in a couple different ways throughout tonight, or different ways that that could look. And so another thing we want to think about when we're thinking about what does a space for learning look like is allowing for flexibility. And I had mentioned this before in thinking about, you know, is your child at the kitchen table? Are they in their bedroom? Are they on the floor? Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to have different rooms as a space, and that's okay. That has happened to me many times, that we are just going to be in the same room and that's it. And so in this situation, I would say try to think about how to show your child to maneuver in the space that they do have. So sitting for 6 hours at a time is very challenging. And this is something that I'm working on with teachers. We're all working on with teachers, and teachers are really trying to teach children how to get up and get moving, and they're trying to build it into the days. And so this is where we really would love families to be there as our partner, to show children or to kind of just go over with children. You know, if you're sitting and you feel like you need to stand, if the teacher hasn't given that break just yet, feel free to kind of just stand up and shift your body. So now you're standing. This is actually my niece in this picture. She's 4, and her mom and I were talking, and she does this very independently while she's doing her virtual preschool, her synchronous preschool. So it can be done. And she happens to be in a room with her brother who's in kindergarten as well, just about 3 feet away from her. He's wearing headphones because of his learning needs. She's not, because of her learning needs and style. But they are both kind of doing this on their own in a very small space that's also their playroom. So there's lots of visual distractions around too. But it is working for them for right now. And so this is another picture that I have found. I don't know if you've seen it going around the internet. I love this picture. I have not kind of ventured out into actually trying this on my own just yet. My husband and I were joking a little while ago when I was making him sit through my presentations like I always do, as my, you know, kind of guinea pig. He said, wow, I wonder how long until she kind of topples off the bike. And I was like, that's a really good question. But assuming that she doesn't, I love the idea of this. And this is a still picture, but there's a video going around of this child actually spinning on the bike while she's in the Zoom. And so what I take from this is not necessarily go out and take your bikes in your home and put shoes at the training wheels. I take speak to your child about what their learning needs are. And if they need to move during a Zoom to help keep them attentive, that is 100% something that we would work with them on in school. And so that's something that we can think about how to do with them at home. For example, students that I used to be a classroom teacher. I'm a coach for teachers now in the district, but for 10 years, I taught at the Lincoln School. And for several of those years, I was a classroom teacher. And when I was a classroom teacher, one of my favorite things to use for students that were, we'll say, struggling to be attentive during whole group instruction, which is very similar to what we see now with Zoom, is a balance board, just like standing and trying to balance. Or standing, if I didn't have a balance board, and saying stand on one leg, okay, stand on the other, and just kind of having that kind of moment of trying to balance. And it was really helpful for keeping them attentive. And so you want to, when you're creating spaces for learning, make sure you're asking your child for their input and giving them options. So again, you might not have this option to put a bike in your home. And again, that's not what I'm saying, but giving your child options for their learning space, for variety in their learning space. And then thinking about those backup spaces. So there's been several times where my daughter and I have been all set up to go, and then my son has started, screaming, because that is real life. And so one of the things we do often is practice just how to transition. Like, oh, Jackie's having a tough moment. What should we do? And she's like, I'll take this to my room. Great. Or like she's been in her room and her brother's crashed into her room, and she's like, oh, I need to go in the kitchen. And so just practicing transitioning between spaces, but it's something that we do when it's not learning time so that she's ready for when it is learning time. And then just, again, thinking about their needs. So do they need the quiet? I've talked a lot about movement, but being in a quiet space is also something that is very important too. And so this is my moment where I just want to pause again and just remind everybody that everyone is in a different place right now, right? We all have incredibly unique situations, and you can read in all those gray boxes just some of the ways that our situations are different. But that red box is what I'm really focusing on, is that I want you just to keep reminding yourself that show yourself grace. We've talked about showing it to me and showing it to Kate and Margaret, and to your teachers and administrators, but it's a good moment to remind you that you need to show it to yourself too, because this is hard. It really, really is. And then to just also remind you, and I've done this a couple times in the presentation, that you just have to ask for help. And so these Thursday nights are something that we're proactively starting to think about of, what could these look like for families through for the next, we'll say, couple months or so on. And so that is something as a way of getting help, right? And we'll talk more about that as the time goes on. And so one of the things that we've tried to do tonight is build in question and answer times, so that you are not having to build up and wait till the end. And so we'll say 5 or so minutes, or until the questions kind of fizzle, or it feels like we should move on, I'm going to open it up. And so if you can keep your questions just to the learning space, you could put your questions in the chat, and Kate and Margaret will either answer them directly, or they can alert me that they have a question that they want me to address. All right, so I'm going to move on, and it looks like Kate and Margaret have been doing an amazing job of answering the questions throughout the time. So please keep using the chat. That's what it's there for. And there will be 2 other stopping points for a Q&A time. So just as a full disclosure for that. So from this moment, we're gonna kind of have a mindful moment together. And I love mindful moments, and I especially love this one, just kind of based off of the nerves that I had for tonight. And this is something that I encourage teachers to do with students when they're feeling anxious or kind of feeling like they're nervous, especially that first day of school. That was how a lot of teachers felt. And so in this moment, I want you to kind of take a deep breath in. And as you're taking that deep breath in, I want you to clench your muscles all over as tight as you can. And then on your breath out, I want you to just breathe out and release everything. And we're going to do that 3 times before we move on. Okay, so breathe in and breathe out. You can even give a little shake on that breathe out. And breathe in, clench up. And breathe out. And thank you for everyone that's doing this with me. And one more time, breathe in, clench up. And breathe out. Thank you, everyone. So now we're going to talk about these types of learning challenges. And so I did the best I could to look at the data that you sent in or the feedback you sent in to come up with these 5 categories. I know this is not going to address everything. There were several comments that felt like they were big for this time frame. So again, when we get to the end and you have this opportunity to give feedback, please feel free to put it there. You can say directly, like, you didn't address my question, like, please address this another time, and I will look at that. Margaret will help me and Kate will help me as well with that. So some of the learning challenges that you might see at home are dependence on an adult, right? There was quite a few comments about that, like they are relying on you and you have work. I get it. It is so hard to find that balance. There was several other comments about too much time sitting, right? And there were comments about this for synchronous teaching, but mostly it was for their asynchronous time. There was also many comments about the child when they are not doing school, they want their screen time. And so we're going to talk about that. It's like, you're on the screen all day and like now you want more screen time. So like, what do we do about that? So we're going to talk about that. Another one is just your child was getting frustrated or it seemed to be frustrated. And so what do we do about that? And then the final one we've talked about this a tiny bit already, but we'll go over it again, is just a distracting environment, right? So not necessarily the home environment. What was coming up was your child seemed to be distracted by what was on the screen. And so we'll talk about that because I feel like we've done a lot of talking about the physical environment in your home. So we'll talk about the virtual environment on the screen. So on the screen right now is my daughter. And this is my daughter that I'm trying very hard to promote independence with. She is in kindergarten for the 2nd year now. She did do kindergarten last year. She is a September baby. And so we know September babies, they are right on the cusp. And so she did kindergarten at a private school last year. And this year she's doing kindergarten in our public school. We are working incredibly hard at promoting independence. And the reason for that right now is because I want her to be independent. But she has her synchronous work from 12:30 to 3. And that is my busiest time of the day with teachers. The morning, I'm not as busy, but right now from 12:30 and onward, it goes past 3. That is my busiest time. So it's like, I don't really have a lot of time to sit with her and really go through things with her. But she's home and I'm home and I'm working from home and I'm trying so hard because Margaret's my boss and I want to make her believe that I'm doing a good job while working from home. So the biggest thing I do with my child right now that it saves me so much time is I take like 3 minutes, seriously 3 minutes, and I preview her work with her. And I do have to check in with her about every 30 to 35 minutes right now, but I preview her work. And she's able to sit there, she's able to click on slides, she's able to find links and toggle between tabs. And it's been going really well for about the week and a half that we've been in school. I try to point out pitfalls to her ahead of time. So what I mean by that is like, don't click on this X, that you will lose the screen if you click on this X. Sometimes we're going to have a child that's like, I'm just going to click on the X just to see what happens or just to get my parents' attention back to me. But I want to believe that over time, like, remember yesterday when you clicked the X, like you lost the screen, and we don't want that to happen again. We practice again moving through the slides. So I usually show her once and it takes me like a minute, and then I have her show me what she would do. And we don't watch videos, we don't do the work, we just kind of like we walk through it. It's kind of like a picture walk when you're reading a story. Another thing that I do with her, and she is a reader, I will say, I will kind of forecast that and say she is a reader, but I do make checklists, and it's very simple. You can see it's a repetitive word. So if by chance your child is not a reader yet, you could see that word says slide. And so when you do slide 1, check that box. And so as we're doing the preview, I'm having her tell me what she thinks the checklist should be. And so as she's doing it, I'm saying, do your checklist. And again, we sit beside each other, usually at the kitchen table. So I can kind of just look at her, but not necessarily micromanage her, which does not help me feel productive in my day. And so then another thing that we do, or that I try to do, is allow her teacher to help her when she's in a synchronous teaching session. So part of her 12:30 to 3 is an hour of synchronous teaching, and it'll eventually be about 2 hours of synchronous teaching. It's just her school is fading it in. And during that synchronous time, and I encourage you to do the same, let the teacher help them as much as possible. Because if they're struggling, that's good feedback for the teacher, right? So if I recognize that if I'm always solving the problem, her teacher, it's not giving her teacher the feedback that she needs to know what her students need. So for example, if she said to my daughter, McKenna, you need to go get your notebook, your reading notebook, and she didn't know where it was, and like 5 other students in the classroom didn't know where it was, that's a lesson that the teacher can teach about how to find your materials or how to store your materials at home. And then the other thing is tech glitches are going to happen. And so we talk about that. We had this moment today where they were celebrating her birthday, and the sound wouldn't happen. And so she started to get really upset. And I said, what happens? She's like, I know tech glitches happen. I'm like, tech glitches happen. And so she was like, all right, I can do this. And I'm like, Mrs. Murphy, she says like she'll handle this tomorrow. So try not to worry. So it's just reminding them that like, you might lose Wi-Fi, and like you might get bumped out of the meet, and like this might happen. So like walking them through how to handle that. So another thing that we have been working on, and again, please use the chat. That's what Kate and Margaret are there for. So please communicate with them if you want clarification on anything. So this work break balance came up quite a few times, or in terms of like, it was, my child has so much work to do and they are really struggling to complete it. So how do I do this? And so my pitch to you is the work break balance. And so your teachers, your children's teachers right now, we've been advising them to do a 25 on, a 5 off type of system. This is a whole method. It's called the Pomodoro method. If you've never heard of it, I highly recommend kind of looking into it, but this is not about the Pomodoro method, so I'm not going to go deeply into it. But it's just basically saying that nothing really super productive is going to happen if you don't stop and take these purposeful breaks. And so one of the things that we've also been kind of talking to teachers about is it should be a moment where they're not sitting and just looking at the screen. It should involve movement, and it might be the teacher playing like a music video or dance, but that in itself will get the child taking their eyes off the screen. When you are doing breaks with your child, or when your child is doing work with you at home, I also advise you to think about this 25 on, 5 off. It might be challenging for you to set the timers. And so I would say, try having your child set the timers. My daughter sets them using Alexa. My son sets them using Alexa. They could very easily kind of set them on a tablet in our home, which we don't really use very often, but that is something that I know you could use, or can very easily set it on my phone. And at least that would give me 25 minutes of working time. And so one of the things that you want to make sure you do, the same as we've been advising teachers, is just practice this maybe during a not school time, right? Or practice it in a moment where you're not necessarily working so that you can walk them through the expectations. Another common comment that came up, and these are 3 direct quotes or 3 direct questions that came up in the feedback. or your child is really preferring screen time in their off time. And so there was a lot of discussion around finding balance. And so the picture on the screen right now is my nephew. He is one of 4 children. He shares a bedroom with his sister. There is an infant in the home, and his room also happens to be the place where his video games are. And so I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she's like, what do I do? She's like, his video games are right in his room. And so we're talking about, well, that might be something to think about is, maybe they need to be in separate places, or maybe we need to think about telling him when he can play video games. So again, everyone's situation is different. We might not always have the opportunity to have video games in a separate place. That is a very realistic possibility in homes. And so just thinking about how do we find the balance? And so the schedule you see on the screen, I love this schedule. Post-its are one of my favorite things to make schedules with because it allows for flexibility, right? So schedules change, right? Like throughout the day, things happen and we need to move things around. And like, I'm totally a person that when things start being crossed out, it's like, it gets me like all crazy. And so Post-its are like your best friend when that happens, because you can just move it and just kind of arrange it the way it needs to be arranged because of the schedule adjustment. And so one of the things you want to think about if your child is trying to play video games at times where they shouldn't be playing video games is not just leaving it as a no, not right now, but saying not right now, you can do it, and filling in when. And when you're making the schedule with them, right, and it could be at the start of the day, it could be the night before. We do schedules at bedtime or like right before bedtime, because the morning, I'm not always the best person in the morning for things like this. But just letting them know kind of when that screen time can happen. Right. And so we have this agreement that screen time happens like right when my daughter gets home from school. She can have about 30 minutes of preferred iPad time. That's it. And because I've noticed that like before bedtime, like doesn't work for her. All right. And so one of the things you want to just really think about is being very clear. And if you start to notice any kind of patterns, just making sure that you are communicating that to your teacher. Or your child's teacher. And then there's this reminder on there that just says, remember, we do need to think about screen breaks for children. I remember I was on my computer a couple of weeks ago for 15 hours straight, just between PD delivery and then prepping for the next day. And I honestly like couldn't see the next by the time I stopped. And now I'm an adult and that's happening to me. So I can't imagine what that does to a child. So just remember, we do need to find this balance, which I'm sure all of you know. And there is a link at the bottom, which I'm not going to click on now, but when you get the slides, you can click on all the links, and I'm going to highlight them kind of as we go along. You can click on that link to look at how to make a schedule with your child, just a more in-depth look at it. So now, I think this was the 4th one that we talked about, or that was mentioned to me, is my child feels really frustrated or seems to be really frustrated or just upset with their workload or the content of their work. And I'm here to say that will continue, right? So work is probably about as easy as it possibly can be at this time. And it will get more challenging as the year goes on, right? We started with like kind of this delay. And so there's this momentum that we're trying to build, and we have to build the stamina quickly with children because we have learning, right, that needs to happen. And so on the screen, you will see one of mine and Miss Mahoney's favorite tools that we use with students. These are just clothespins, right? You can get these at the dollar store. And she happened to wind pipe cleaners around them. And I've always in the past hot glued pom-poms. And so we love using these with students in the classroom, that they are communicating to us non-verbally, whether they are fine on their own, which is green, yellow, which would be, can you check on me when you have a few moments? I'm okay right now, but I really do need a check-in. Or red, which is like, I'm going to explode, I can't handle this, or I'm going to shut down, and like, I can't go on without you. And so this is something I would highly encourage thinking about at home, because when our children are in a place, our students are in a place of kind of, we call it a growing dysregulation, or just a growing moment of like, I can't do this, or I can't go on, it shuts them down. And when I say shuts them down, it starts to take away that ability of communicating verbally, like being able to say, I can't do this. And so giving them a tool, right? So these clips, a tool to communicate. And so you, as the grown-up in the home, you could just glance to see, oh, they just changed to yellow. All right, I'm going to finish this email and then I'm going to pop over. Or to say to your child, like, I'm going to finish this email, then I'll come see you. Or if you see them red, you might say, this email needs to wait. I'm coming right now, and just kind of communicate that with them. We've also done it with paper cups, and I've done it with just like pieces of cardboard and like a crayon, and just made like little tents. So it is by far the tool I recommend the most when you're trying to get a child to communicate nonverbally. You might also think about hand signals, having like a secret hand signal that your child can use with you, or like a code word. That's another really great one. But whatever it is, just having them have something that they can communicate to you. And I do highly encourage the nonverbal, just because it does get hard to verbalize that or to say it when you're kind of in that place of being upset or anxious or disappointed. And so we've talked about this communicating piece, but now thinking about the managing, right? So when we're communicating, we're trying to get our child to be self-aware. So this is what I'm feeling, right? I'm feeling this way because. And so then you have this question afterwards, which is, well, what are you going to do about it, right? Like, you feel frustrated because you can't do your, writing work. Well, what are we going to do to help you get better, help you be ready to go back to that, right? And so here's some suggestions for how you can create a space in your home, or how you can utilize tools to get your child ready to learn, or ready to go back to learning. So one of the things that I'm recommending, or having you kind of think a little bit more about, and this might be a moment where you say, we need to go back to this and talk more about this in another session. So this is just a moment to kind of write that note down so you can report that in the feedback. But having a break space in your home that's not like this work break, this 25 on 5 off break, but an actual like kind of, I hate to call them calm down spaces, but that's often what they're referred to as. I usually just say like a cozy space, right? So my son, I talked about him in the beginning. My son is like, cozy spaces were made for him. We have them all over our home. We practice them all over our home. His closet is a cozy space. Under my kitchen table is a cozy space. Under my desk is a cozy space. And we call them that, and we practice using them because he is aggressive. He is hot-tempered. Just this morning, and I will talk about this with a little bit more clarity at the end. Just this morning, I have scratches on my arm just because of how challenging the morning actually was with my son. It is not rainbows and butterflies in my house. Sometimes I don't take my own advice, right? And so one of the things that I do often with my child, and my daughter often just joins, because that's the kid she is we practice using the break space. And when I have a moment like I did this morning, it tells me I have to practice this a little bit more than I have, because we've definitely been getting lax with it. We want to provide tools when they're going into these kind of these regulation stations, or these cozy spaces, that they can return from. Like, this is not a place for electronics. Electronics are often incredibly preferred items for children. So that is not something I would recommend putting there. Joke books are like one of my favorite tools to have in stations like that. If you have a reader, or you could read the jokes to your children, it is like the ultimate cognitive distraction for breaking or changing the channel that they are on. And you just want to kind of think about other things. Like, my son has this like little pinball kind of toy that he loves to play with when he's in those moments, or that helps him kind of get distracted enough to forget what he's upset about in those moments. And you just want to really talk about with your child, like, how is this break different from what we did when we did the 25 on 5 off? Like, in those 5 off breaks, that might be their opportunity to get a drink of water, to go to the bathroom, to just get up and kind of do some stretching. Whereas in this moment, when they're in this point of dysregulation, or this point of frustration, upset, anxiousness, we're trying to get them back to a state of calm, back to a place where they can be ready to learn. Okay. And so the bottom one is really the biggest one I want to point out, is it is important as this partnership with your classroom, your child's classroom teacher, that you're this helper at home or you're this partner at home, that you kind of take note of patterns the same way we would in school. Because when they in school, if we notice a child repeatedly needing breaks like this at a specific time, we can prep them, or we can think of things they need, accommodations they need to help them through that in a proactive way. And so my advice, or my kind of just extra strategy or extra tidbit for you, is to just say, take note of when it's happening, if it's happening, so that you and the teacher can talk about how to proactively do this together. And so one of the other learning challenges that I just wanted to talk about is limiting distractions. And so on the screen right now is my niece, Kennedy. And Kennedy gets very overwhelmed with visual distractions. And so you can't see it because I cropped the image, but behind that there's balloons and there's laundry, and her sister was on the table, and there's like all kinds of crazy things happening in the house. This is one of my sister-in-law. And she, my sister-in-law, behind her child's tablet, just a black kind of screen. You can see my battery is fine. You can see that now. She put this black, just like trifold board behind it, so that her daughter wasn't like seeing all that stuff around it, right? So just something as simple as that can kind of block out that external stimuli and just keep them focused on what's in front of them. The other thing that I'm just starting to work on with teachers, and they are going to start working on with their students, and other teachers are working, or other, we'll say coaches and individuals in the district are working on with teachers, is this pinning kind of, this pinning tool on a Google Meet. And so on a Google Meet, if you hover over the speaker's screen, so the teacher's screen, there's a pin. And if you click the pin, it makes the teacher full screen. And so one of the things I'm advising teachers, it happened 3 times this week, I've said, like, you have to use the pin tab, or teach them how to use this pin tab, because it takes away like this overload of the screen. Margaret and I talk about this all the time, how the screen is so overwhelming when you see like 24 children or 24 faces. And so teaching them how, oh, your teacher's teaching, remember, use the pin, and just kind of prompting them to put it up. And so I'm going to pause now to just see if any questions are coming up about challenges while learning at home. And you're welcome to put that question in the chat.
Jess, a really great one just came up in the chat. Just kind of thinking about strategies in synchronous versus asynchronous, as well as thinking about knowing when to step in versus letting the teacher kind of handle what's going on. And I thought that's probably one that a few people maybe are thinking about.
Okay, so I'm here, if I'm looking at this correctly, so I see Mark's question. Are these strategies more for asynchronous learning? So I would say it's a combination of both. So some of them, yes, and I apologize if I wasn't making it super clear throughout. So if you have like a specific strategy that you're questioning, feel free to kind of jump in. And so I also see just a couple other questions to try to talk about. Maybe this will answer your question, Mark, because they're a little more specific. So the 25 on, 5 off, those are being recommended to kind of be set by teachers. They might be doing it more in like a pacing way. So like, we're going to finish this assignment and then take 5 minutes. So we've kind of advised like 25, 30 minutes. And if they're getting to that point, give them this 5 minutes, but give them a 5-minute kind of like, we'll say purposeful break. And so that's a strategy we're advising teachers to use, but we're also saying, hey, during asynchronous time, if your child has like a big chunk of work. So during like those hybrid weeks, for example, where they might be, not with their teacher for 2 hours of time, I would strongly advise using the 25 on, 5 off, and kind of working on setting a timer with your child, maybe in the off time, like in the evening, so that they learn how to do that. Because I get it, like doing it while you're working is really hard. And so then, aren't there times when the teachers want us to? Yes, there are definitely times the teacher wants you to use grid view. And so those are words that we're trying to get the student to understand, right? So during that community circle time in the morning, yeah, you want to see grid view. Like you want the student to see their classmates. But if the teacher's giving a lesson, like if it's the time where the teacher's, like I was in a classroom and the teacher was reading a story, and it was really hard to see the teacher. Like she was tiny, tiny, tiny on the screen. And so then I pinned it and I was like, oh, there's the book. And so just teaching that as part of the routine. And so what I'm kind of sharing is that's something where language that we're trying to get teachers comfortable with, and you as their partner at home, we're hoping that, that's language that you can try to also use. Yeah, the typing is a tricky one. I would say voice to text. If they're in a Google Doc or a Google slide, you would just use under tools, there's voice typing. You could just use that. And there's other extensions. And if you're curious about extensions for something like that, that's really good feedback to put in the chat or in the feedback form at the end. And we can share that with the digital literacy team. Yeah, so the clothespin's very true. But I'm thinking more around the if they're home and they might have a question, and so the teacher might not be as accessible in that moment. Your class, every teacher's so different with how they're doing it. They may be checking the asynchronous work live, but if they have students in front of them, they might not necessarily. So it really depends on the grade level right now. K and 1 may not be able to do that right now. Whereas like 2 through 6, they're fully remote right now. They likely will be able to. But when we shift learning models, that is likely a strategy that I would want you to kind of think about. I'm just trying to see if I missed anything else. Yeah, the schedule's tricky. I get it. Like infants are really challenging and they throw everything off. And so I would say that's where the Post-its can be really helpful, because you can shift things around, and that honestly does something even better for your child. It just teaches them flexibility. Like our schedule changes, right? And so showing them that like, it's just not time for me to help you, or it's just not time for us to do this yet. Let's just rearrange things. And that happens to me all the time. Okay, so I think I kind of got through those, and I'm going to scooch on. And if we have time at the end, there will be another opportunity for questions. And if not, you can put them in the feedback form. So we're going to briefly talk about goal setting. And again, if you feel like you want to go into this deeper, feel free to just put that in the feedback. So why do we use goal setting with our child? We use goal setting because we want to have an opportunity to think about what our day is going to look like, right? And to give our child an opportunity to have a voice in something they want to work really hard at during the day. Teachers are doing this with children this year. And so this is just a way of having that continuity of language or what we're doing in school at home. And it doesn't need to look exactly like what the teacher's doing. I'm going to give you 2 possible templates, but it could just be as simple as a conversation at home. It doesn't need to be something that gets recorded. It just could be, hey, like, what do you want to do today? Like, what's your goal for today? I've been saying it to my daughter every day this week on our drive to school, like, what's something you want to do at school today? And she's like, I really want to make a new friend today. Awesome. And so how are you going to do that? And she's like, I'm going to ask someone to play at recess. Great idea. What are you going to do if they say no? Like, so we're thinking about that obstacle. And so one of the things she said was, well, I could say, well, do you want to play tomorrow? And then this was yesterday. And I said, well, what if they say no to that? And she's like, I could just find someone else to play with. And I'm like, true. And so she went out and she tried her plan. We had talked about her obstacles. And then when I picked her up yesterday, she's like, I achieved my goal. And so when I picked her up, she was like all smiles, like so happy, like so excited to share that she like did her goal. And I was like, well, what went well? Like, how did that happen? And so she was so excited to kind of tell me that whole story. So again, it doesn't need to be this like very explicit, like planned out thing on paper. It could just be as simple as a question or a discussion. If you are a person that feels like you want something that's you're recording or kind of guiding you through the discussion with your child, on this slide, when you get the slides, if you click on the blue Google Doc icon, that will take you to a template, or on the Google slide, that will take you to a template. And so again, you want to try asking your child, or make sure you're asking them, what do you want to accomplish? What do you think you need to do to accomplish that, right? And you're going to say this in much friendlier kind of like parent or guardian kind of friendly terms to your child. What do you think could get in the way of you doing that, right? So proactively thinking about obstacles and then taking that time to reflect with them, right? And so this was another thing that came up in the feedback, was discussion about this. And I can't stress enough, like reflect, and think about, what are you going to do about that tomorrow? Like, are you going to have the same goal, or are you going to think of something different? And then that can give you a jumping off point for your morning breakfast or your morning drive or whatever it is that you are doing. And so just to kind of start to get towards the end, thinking about overcoming goals or obstacles that come from goal setting. If they're straying from their goal, so during the day, if you notice them not working towards this, just try reminding them of their goal. Like, hey, remember, like you set this goal this morning. Try reviewing strategies with them. So if their goal, kind of involves like those clothespins as a strategy, try reminding them like, hey, we practiced this. You know how to use this strategy. My favorite one is always modeling. Like, how would you handle it, right? Taking that moment to think aloud with your child. Like, well, if it were me, this is what I would do, and this is how I would handle it. What do you think about my approach? Or what do you think about what I would do? And just really and truly, that last one is so important. And I'll say that's my strategy that I had to use this morning with my son, is just taking a breath, walking away for a moment, and then just coming back when you are ready to help them. Sometimes we do need to walk away ourselves. And so this next slide is just a reminder, or just like this full disclosure, like I'm an open book of what the situation looked like with my son this morning. I've been talking about this the whole time. My son woke up this morning and he decided to just pitch a fit that he wanted to wear the shirt he wore to school yesterday. And last night, his fit came from, he didn't want to take this shirt off for bed. And like, he has dried applesauce on it, food. And my husband had said, that is not a battle I want to pick with him. He's like, let him wear it to bed. And I was like, oh, you're giving me a battle for the morning. I can already see it. And it was a battle for the morning. And so what our compromise was that we ended up coming up with after, toys were thrown and scratches happened and hair was pulled, and not me pulling him pulling mine. And just baskets were emptied and all kinds of stuff. And this is after some cleaning. So the compromise was we let him wear the shirt, but he put a new shirt over it, right? And so I yelled and I screamed, and then I exited the situation for 5 minutes. I took some deep breaths. I gave myself a pep talk and said, you cannot control him, but you can influence him. And I walked back in and I said, Jackson, let's troubleshoot this. What do you need, buddy? And so we talked it out, and that's when we came up with the solution. And so I just want to remind everyone that there's going to still be hard moments. There's going to still be tough days. Like, I have them all the time, just like everyone, I'm sure, here. And if you are not having them, like, you can lead the next webinar, because I clearly, I haven't figured it out how to not have that. But remember that your reaction influences. It doesn't control, it influences their reactions. And so just one final kind of reminder of what we talked about today. And just on this slide, think about beginning with a mindful moment. And we call this kind of a soft start with your child. Just like, let's just take a minute to take a few deep breaths together. Could be as simple as like what we did, just clench up, wiggle it out, clench up, wiggle it out. Take a minute to have that goal, set that goal with them, talk about the obstacles, right? That will help you overcome a lot of challenges. It's just having that discussion. Take a minute to maybe preview their work. So even if you want to start to take that hands-off approach of helping them a lot throughout their day, totally understand. I'm trying to do the same, but taking that like 2-3 minutes to just preview it can be so helpful for them. And really, I highly, highly encourage the reflecting on their goal or reflecting on their day. And I just want you to really remember that we are here for you, but we are here for you only if you ask for help. I have seen about between like, we'll say 50 and 65 people here tonight. So I can tell that people, this is important to people. And I know that over 300 RSVP'd, so they're looking for the video. This is a way of getting help, right? We're bringing these kind of webinars to you. So communicate with us. What do you need? What do you want? You also have your child's teacher, you have principals, you have counselors. I'm a coach, right? So you have us, but just ask for us. And so we are going to skip over the final Q&A time just because of timing. But when the slides get sent out to you, and Kate, maybe you could copy, actually, I will get the feedback form for you and just put it in the chat because I don't even know if Kate would have that handy. She might. And you're welcome to just fill out the feedback form now, or you can wait until you get the slides, right? But thank you all for being here. It was awesome to have you, and I look forward to seeing you again. How do I do this?